Hello YouTube, Sidekick here in my Su-25T. I'm going to do a little bit of a takeoff, navigation, and landing tutorial today. We're just about ready to get rolling here. We're spooling up. Brakes off, and there we go. Alright, just got to keep it straight down the runway now to about 240 kilometers an hour. Just right about there, so gentle pressure back, and we're unglued. Alright, wheels up, a little bit of pressure down on the nose to keep from ballooning while we get the flaps up. Once we get things stabilized here, I'm going to pause it and talk a little bit about the HUD that we're going to use for navigation. Okay, so we've paused. Take a look at this diagram. Let's say I have a plane. It's got 3 waypoints. It's going to fly 1, 2, 3. Now, as it goes around the second waypoint, it's probably going to overshoot a little. That's what normally happens. Now it's going to be pointed at the third waypoint. Now, if you had a waypoint navigating HUD, the director circle in the green circle would be telling you that you were pointed in the right direction, and you would continue flying, and it would take you to the waypoint. But this is not a waypoint guidance HUD. This is a path guidance HUD. So what is going to happen instead is that the director circle is going to show you how to get back on the flight path. So it's going to be deflected to the left. And then it's going to want you to fly to the left until you intercept the path. And then it's going to tell you to bank back to the right and fly along the original flight path until you get to the waypoint. Now, this can be a very effective way of making sure that you fly an accurate track, but it can also lead to a little bit of circle chasing as it floats back and forth across the path if you're not careful. Okay, let's restart the sim. Okay, taking a look at the HUD, we have some fairly standard elements in the top left. We have our target speed, our actual speed, and the little triangle that shows our acceleration. So when the triangle is to the right, we're accelerating. To the left, like now, it's decelerating. Top right, we have our target altitude and our actual altitude, and the R means it's a radar altitude. On the bottom, we have the letters ENR for en route, and then we have the distance to the next waypoint and the waypoint identification. And as you can see, we just switched to waypoint 2. And as we're coming around, we managed to keep the circle in the middle, which means we're staying reasonably close to the actual path we're supposed to be on. Oops, a little bit ahead of it, have to come back. This will be a constant feature of this flight, is probably chasing that circle around a little bit. It does take a little bit of getting used to when you're used to flying waypoint to waypoint to actually try and stay on path. For those of you who are used to flying TACAN or ILS, it's pretty much like flying that kind of system, but all the way through the track. So we need to come back to the right a little bit to stay on our path. We're a little bit slow, we need to speed up a little. And we're just about the right altitude. I find the altitude maintenance particularly touchy, and I tend to chase the circle all over the place trying to get to the right altitude, but it is what it is. Okay, so we're coming up on waypoint 2 now. I've automatically incremented the waypoint to waypoint 3. There is a waypoint increment button that you can program to your HOTAS. Just need to check into controls to see where it is. So as we come around here, eventually off the right, you're going to see we're going to fly by another iron bombing test range that I've set up on this map because we're going to be dropping some bombs on it with the Grach. For now, we're just going to fly by it. So we need to roll out a little bit. Hopefully get back on the center. There we are. Not bad. So as you can see, flying with the HUD makes the experience quite a bit different than flying the base model. When we did the takeoff and landing test with that, spent a lot of time with their head inside the cockpit. That's definitely one of the advantages of the of the T model. Here you can see the iron bombing test range. Just on the right, we'll get to know that place a little bit better, I'm sure. So an interesting note on the history of the T model, it really was meant to be sort of a super Grach. It was kind of an upgrade that was similar to the one I think that the A10A got to turn it into the A10C. The difference with the Su-25 was that essentially they took the space that had been reserved for a second crewman in the two-person trainer model, and they filled it with avionics. And it just added so much weight and complexity that in the end they really didn't feel it was very worth it. And in fact, only 12 of the T model were ever actually made. They saw some limited combat, but they really haven't been used very much. The base model, on the other hand, there's over 700 of those made between the domestic and the export market. So it really is the model of the Su-25 that's been used mostly. Right, so we're coming up on making our turn back towards the airport. We're just going to let it increment now. What I have done is, instead of incrementing the waypoint, I've changed the HUD mode to return, or RTN. So once again, you can find that switch in the controls to change HUD mode. And so we've gone to return mode. So return mode is very much like a TACAN sort of mode. So what it's going to do is set us up on a radial that leads to the runway at the right altitude and glide slope. And then once it's done that, it's going to switch to landing mode, which is essentially like an automated ILS. Like I said, it's a very capable HUD. It's actually a very useful system. Makes landing the Su-25 a lot easier. Okay, so you can hear we've put the dive brakes on because we're a little fast. It wants us down around 350, and it wants us a lot lower. So to do that, I think I need the dive brakes. So I'm not going to dive at the circle. I'm going to let as the speed comes off, I think we're going to start to descend, and I think that's all we'll probably need to do. So you can see nice gradual descent. Still got 7.5 kilometers or so. Speed's coming down. It's not quite there yet. And there you can see the field over there. So we're going to get lined up here soon. Yep. Getting close to the altitude. Circle's moving up. Speed's almost there. Going to start turning a little bit beforehand. Otherwise, I think we'll probably overshoot. And then we're just about on altitude, so we'll take the dive brakes off. Coming up on 3 kilometers from the radial. Start turning into it. And you'll see once we get close enough, we'll switch to LNDG, or landing mode. There we are. And it's telling us we need to increase the rate of turn. So we did, in fact, kind of overshoot the radial. Now we'll have to come back onto it. Yep, and it's also telling us to reduce speed and get down to our glide slope. So that's what we'll do. So we'll get the flaps down at this point. Get a little bit of ballooning from the flaps that we got to push back against. Basically at idle, trying to get the speed down to something around 280, 300. And we're still a little high, and we're still a little off to the right, so we're working those things out. But the altitude's coming down, speed's coming down. We're working our way back onto the runway radial. And we'll get the gear down. And that'll probably just about kill off the last of the speed we need to kill. And we're starting to lose altitude, so we're coming onto the glide slope. So increasingly I'm starting to watch the runway rather than the HUD, at least part of the time. I find the HUD is good for getting the essential lineup, but if I try to follow it too close down to the ground, I just end up chasing it all over the place. All right, just about on speed. We're still a little to the right, but we're working that out. Glide slope looks pretty good. And we just want to be careful here not to let ourselves get behind the power curve. So get ready to add a little bit of power if we start to get low. And now I'm really starting to watch the runway rather than the HUD. It's looking pretty good. Slow down a little bit. There's the outer beacon at 4 kilometers. Just about lined up now. Just about on speed and on glide slope. We're continuing to watch our numbers here. It's looking good. And a little bit of power. There's the inner beacon. And as with the base model, we're looking to flare somewhere near the end of the runway and touch down somewhere around the black marks. So here we come to the rotate point. And there's the flare. And there's the touchdown. A little early. And once again, we use the parachutes to slow down. Do not use the brakes to try and slow down the Su-25. All right, looks like we've had a successful flight. That was just a little bit to show taking off and landing using the HUD as a guide. I think you'll have to agree with me that the HUD is really improves the flying experience, certainly for landing compared to the base model. And once you get used to the path guidance, it's actually a very accurate way to fly a pre-planned track. So it's, the Su-25T, despite the fact that its flight characteristics are not quite as nice as the base model, does have a very sophisticated electronics package. In fact, one of the issues was that there was a feeling that it was just too sophisticated for the role that the Su-25 was supposed to fill. But it does make it a very interesting plane to fly. You can do an awful lot of things with it. And I'm looking forward to exploring some of those things. So we're just going to get off the runway here now. All right, well, that's probably going to do it for today. If you're enjoying these videos, please subscribe to the channel and like the videos. And stay tuned. There's going to be more coming on the Su-25, both the base model and the T. But for now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.